And welcome back, podcast peeps, to another edition of My Fantasy Podcast from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. We are in the thick of football season now. It's here. I mean, all you got to do is step outside. You can smell it. Football is here. Thankfully, because there's been some slow time in sports here going on over the last month or so, but football is here, so that means fantasy drafts, and that's what we're going to be covering today. We got some mailbag questions to answer from you guys at home, so we appreciate that. All fantasy related, so it's time of the year to start breaking down fantasy football because My Fantasy Sports Talk has our fantasy league draft coming up this Sunday. I don't know how it's here already, but I'm your host, Brandon Reed. My co-host is Daniel Shaw. This Sunday?
It's scheduling. It's all about scheduling, man. You try and plan a draft date with 14 guys living in 14 different states, basically, and you get back to me with a better draft date.
Then you got guys throwing you crap all season long about this rule is wrong. You need to make this rule change. This is ridiculous. I can't stand guys like that. That makes the commissioner's job hard.
You add a lot of stress to my life, and it's unnecessary, Brandon.
Hey, but I got a feeling the league is going to be better this coming year because of it. Folks at home, we didn't even have an IR slot last year. I can't deal with that. There has to be an IR slot. Then limited acquisitions too. No IR and limited acquisitions. That makes for a tough league, especially if you have players going down. So it's all kind of luck of the draw there. But we're heavily fantasy football today. A lot going on in the Buffalo area. So we brought in our guy, Ryan Thomas, too. I mean, he can talk Bills, I guess, but he's really just here for his general input. So I hope he can handle that. What up, Ryan?
I can handle it. I'm good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. So you got Brendan Griffin on your podcast as well. Like it?
Yeah, he was a great guest to have. We talked about a lot of different things, the pro wrestling scene right now, the past, the present, the future, his career. We discussed as well MMA, Ronda Rousey going from MMA to the WWE. So a little bit of something for everybody. There was some pro football talk. I asked Brendan who is 5 most influential people in sports, people that he looks up to. And Tom Brady was at the top of his list. So, check that out.
Attended his academy, TB12 Academy.
Right. We talked about that. And, you can check that out. It's on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel and Facebook page.
There you go. So shout out Brendan Griffin doing big things. We'll have him back on soon. Again, off the top, like I said, today is all about fantasy football. I can't wait. Ryan, are you ready for a draft this coming Sunday?
I'm ready, man. The first year I went 10-4. Last year I went 7-6. I hope I get back to that 10-4 range. That's the goal.
It's tough. You
got to be prepared.
Never know what'll happen, and just,
right.
But this year,
Brandon, you haven't mentioned that I won the championship last year. So is that next? Is that coming next?
As I was saying, Ryan, we got a lot of positive rule changes, thanks to some good folks out there in the league that try to just even the league out a little bit because it makes it hard sometimes when you have rules set up the way they were. So I don't know.
The way I see it, Brandon won the first year I played. Dan won last year. Now it's my turn, right?
That's the way you see it. The way I see it, I'm looking to break this split that Dan and I have is the way what I'm seeing. Last year was an off year. So I gave Dan his glory. Now I'm back serious. No more Eddie Lacy in my diet. No more Spencer Ware. So
it's rough.
I'm ready.
No more taking quarterbacks in the second round for me, and that's all I'll say.
Yeah, probably. I think that depends year from year. I mean, that's never a popular strategy, but to me, if it's somebody like Aaron Rodgers, who is going to probably put up 30 points a game, then and be one of the top fantasy producers, I want that guy on my team. I've drafted quarterbacks number 1 overall before, but I think it depends on year by year. Mostly, I think that running back position is going to be really what's important. And looking at our mailbag questions here, the majority of the questions and our time spent probably today will be talking about fantasy running back. So really key position there. But let's just dive right into it. So we're going to hear from our guy, Nick Pertins is back. Got to be expecting a young one there soon, Dan, right? I mean, we just keep tick-tocking. Fall is almost here. So we're going to have a young trash-talking Pertins on our hands real soon.
Yeah, man, he's been, I guess, not super busy lately because he's just been blowing up the fantasy baseball message boards, calling both of us out. We actually, the Pertons and I swung a deal last minute with the trade deadline, so that was good. He's always up for a trade, and he's not. It's weird. He tries to screw you, Brandon, but he already screwed me once, so I think I may have gotten him back with this one. But
here's the thing: sometimes you're just trading to be trading. Sometimes, I mean, I probably had an offer on the table from Nick all year long at one point or another. So then he got on me about, hey, not even either decline the trade or accept it or let's negotiate. Don't just let it go. I'm like, Nick, I don't even check this message board, but once every 2.5 months or so. So this is the first time I've ever seen that message. It was back from May. So I'm just not making deals to be making deals, and I don't know enough. I don't watch enough baseball to know. I don't know. I'm letting my team ride. But I appreciate all the trade offers all year long, Nick. They were plenty. So I did see a last minute deal swung by you guys though. But I mean, seriously, Dan, it seems like Nick is just looking to make deals all year long.
Yeah, I mean, some guys are like that. I mean, he keeps the fantasy season interesting, we'll say that. And I'm looking forward to this. Is going to be the first year he's in the football league with us. So that should just keep football season fun. And it's going to keep something going on the podcast every week, and even with a newborn on the way. I think from what I remember, maybe November is the due date or somewhere around there. But he's going to keep this fantasy season interesting, and I think we're going to incorporate that a lot on the podcast since he is a dedicated viewer, listener, and watcher of us.
Well, and says that he's dominating that baseball league, which he may have the best overall team right now. Pitching staff he got a murderous rotation, that pitching depth, but he's technically number 2 as Jason Weeks went down 2 weeks in a row as Dan put Jason Weeks down, and then I followed it up with a knockout blow. So number 1 may not be so number 1. Nick Pertins may have the best overall team, and then me and Dan are fighting for that 3rd and 4th spots as Dylan Davis Toronto just had the best 2 days in league history on me. So he's trying to knock me straight up out the playoffs, and I don't appreciate that. But one more regular season week to go after this, and the playoffs start for the Fantasy Baseball League. We may be crowning a new champion. Nick Pertins wins the fantasy crown his first ever time being in a MFST league. Then major props to you. But here is his football question. Me and Nick probably share this like keeping up with Tennessee, and the Titans are probably our favorite football team. So this is kind of a Tennessee-related question. But looking forward to the football league this year, fellas, looking at my domination of the baseball league. Yeah, we hear you, Nick. You're probably scared about this upcoming NFL season. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Tennessee question for you. Where would you look to draft Dion Lewis? And is he a solid running back 2 option? Can't wait for the draft. Nick Pertins. So, I'll kind of start with the Tennessee stuff. I would say solid number 2. No, I'm not willing to go that far. I think the main reason is just because from what I'm seeing hearing out of Titans camp and the beat writers and reporters there is that Derrick Henry's got the keys to this car. He's gonna be the workhorse this year, and I see Dion Lewis is more into the game for a lot more pass blocking situations and maybe catching a few passes here and there, which, that's the role he had brought into a perfect fit if you're talking about success of the Tennessee Titans. I'm just not sure that translates to big fantasy value, especially not running back 2 fantasy value out of Dion Lewis. So we'll see. I don't know. I would expect them to really run Derrick Henry while you're only paying him about $1.4 million this year, and just run the hell out of him and see what you have and see if you really have that. So I think RB2, you're looking to invest that much into Dion Lewis, that may not be the wisest choice right now. I'm thinking when I think of Dion Lewis, I'm thinking maybe of more your 4th running back option. And if he turns out more than that, that's great. But if you got to think, if you're drafting running backs round 1 and 2, which a lot of guys will do, you don't want to reach in the top 4, 5, 6 rounds for Dion Lewis. I don't think so. I think he'll be there. So don't take him too high, I guess would be my warning as far as Dion Lewis goes. Dan, what do you think?
Well, I running back to it obviously depends how deep the league is. Ours is a 14-man league, so maybe I can see him as an RB2 in a 14-man league. He's more of a flex play in my estimation. But
would you classify him like preseason though, going into the draft as an RB2? Are you willing to go that high? Because you got to think an RB2 for you is going to be a top 4 round pick, a top 4 pick. Yeah. Seriously. Yeah,
so he has Lewis has an ADP right now of 62nd overall. So in a 10-man league, that's 6th round. So he's getting drafted, 4 to 6 rounds, 12 and 14-man leagues. So I personally wouldn't feel comfortable just because he isn't the starter. Derrick Henry is the starter. But Tennessee didn't give him $20 million not to use him. So I do think he is going to get used. Tennessee has the 5th easiest strength of schedule for running backs this year, which is another thing that I look at. And I think he's going to be the safety blanket of Marcus Mariota this year. So he's going to surprise. He's in PPR formats. He's going to be a weekly start option on your team. So I am high on him. RB2 is kind of pushing it. I would be comfortable with him as a flex play, especially in PPR leagues. But I do think he's going to get used quite a bit this year.
I love the role he fits as a Titans fan. Yep. It's just that I'm not sure that's going to translate to fantasy value because a lot of that role, like I said, is going to be pass blocking situations. And I don't know Mike Vrabel's scheme, not to mention Matt LaFleur. Don't know really what to expect out of him. I hear him and Mariota are both learning together at the same time. So I don't even know what to expect out of the offense, period. So to me, it's kind of a risk to even think about investing Dion Lewis as your RB2, unless it really is a deep league. Ours 14. Yeah, you're right, Dan. That puts it about 5th round for us in a 14-man league. So to me, I think that's pushing it when there's just too much unknown. Although I do love Dion Lewis on the Titans, if that makes sense. Ryan, so what do you think about Dion Lewis in the Titans backfield in general?
Dion Lewis is a guy that, as the season wore on last year with New England, he put up fantastic numbers. But my main question is not even so much the scheme and how he'll fit with the Titans it's more so how will he fit with the Titans being that they're a new team. Sometimes I'm kind of leery of drafting players that are changing scenery. He was so entrenched in that New England offense.
Well, and I also think that Mariota's part of that too.
To Tennessee.
This is a transition year for Mariota as well. I think Mariota's going to have some things to figure
out. Right. Vrabel is a New England Patriot coach descendant from Belichick. Obviously, going to complement the offense that they've had the last few years. I honestly don't know, but I would say, according to his ADP average draft position, I'd say that 7th, 8th round, I think he would be worth it. But I don't know. It would be tough for me to start him every single week as an RB2 in my lineup. I'd see him as more of a flex guy, potentially an RB2 depending on the matchup, and that's that.
And I would love to see that, but I don't think you're going to know that right off the bat. That's why I think it's a high risk as far as drafting. I think you're going to have to let the Titans kind of play themselves out for 4 or 5 weeks to find out who they are. Seriously, everybody. We got a whole new coaching staff in place here. So I don't know. That's a risk to me. I don't know. I would say just don't draft him too high. Don't. To me personally, I'll give away my thinking in my head. I'm not going to touch him in the first 6 rounds. It's too much for me. That's
7th, 8th round. I would consider it.
And also depending on how depleted the available running back list is looking.
Right.
Yeah. So in a 14-man league, that's going to be tough. So we'll see where he falls. That's a scenario Nick may be facing this Sunday. I'll tell you that much for sure. In our fantasy league, now you've brought it up, and at least 4 of us know about it, Nick. So who's going to reach for Dion Lewis first? That's the question. So we probably should just lie to Nick and tell him he's a 2nd rounder, Nick. He's a 2nd rounder. Go for it. Maybe that's the last words he'll hear. But appreciate the question. Good luck in the baseball league as well. And we'll see you and talk some more smack with you Sunday in the fantasy draft. The next one comes from Todd Stepnowski. Kenyon Drake or Joe Mixon in a half-point PPR league. I want to hear what Dan has to say on this because I think he's going to disagree with me. I don't know, but I'm just curious to see what he's going to say.
Well, if we're looking at my rankings, which you can check out in the fantasy draft guide that MFST has brought out, I like both running backs. I'm high on them both this year, but I think Joe Mixon is going to break out of that rookie slump that he kind of had, and he's going to bust out a little bit in 2018. I have him as my 10th ranked running back, where Kenyon Drake is my 17th ranked running back. So if you're telling me both of those two, I'm going to take Joe Mixon, but it's close. I mean, it's not too far. A couple things on Kenyon Drake that I actually love is he was number one last year in yards after contact. I have it written down at 571 yards after contact on only 133 carries. That was better than Adrian Peterson's yards after contact, his MVP season of 2012.
And not a huge frame on him either. We were talking about like 205 pounds.
Yeah, Kenyon Drake can ball. I mean, he is going to be the feature back in Miami. They have Frank Gore. They have a terrible rookie, Kalen Ballage, out of Arizona State. So Drake is going to be the main guy there, where you might look at Joe Mixon, who has Gio Bernard. They have some other guys in that backfield, like Mark Walton, a rookie out of Miami. But I think Mixon is too talented to not put up numbers this year. So I'm taking Mixon slightly, but Kenyon Drake is a solid play, basically week in, week out in fantasy this year.
See, I knew you were going to be high on Kenyon Drake, and I'm not as much, and I knew that, so that's why I was a little bit shocked. But I'm going to say Joe Mixon too. That it's not close to me. It's Joe Mixon, because what I heard out of Miami is that Kenyon Drake is labeled as the co-starter for the Miami Dolphins along with Frank Gore. So I don't like that. Whereas everything I'm hearing out of Cincinnati is that yes, Joe Mixon is our bell cow. Actually heard that term used. He is going to be the workhorse for sure, the number one guy solidified for the Cincinnati Bengals. Also, you mentioned an up and down year for him in his rookie year, but he caught a lot more balls than Kenyon Drake did last year in his rookie season. In 14 games, he caught 30 balls. Kenyon Drake caught around 22 or some balls like that. I don't know, but I think that, first of all, Joe Mixon in his second year he's asking specifically about a PPR league, is Todd. So that's why I'm saying for sure Joe Mixon, not to mention just overall relative fantasy value. I think Joe Mixon's going to be higher, but Joe Mixon's just going to catch more balls than Kenyon Drake. I've never really been high on Tannehill. You know, I kind of feel the same way about him as some people do about Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco. I would take Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco over Tannehill right now this year, to me. Just my opinion. I've never been real high on Tannehill. So I'm mixing all the way here. It's not close to me. So if I had to summarize it, overall fantasy value, I see Joe Mixon as that top 10 type of fantasy guy, and I'm not sure Kenyon Drake is top 20 in my opinion. That's just me. Ryan, how would you assess this situation in comparison between Joe Mixon and Kenyon Drake this year?
I assess it as I think Miami is going to have some real struggles, and I don't know how often they're going to be playing, close in games. How often will they be having to run the ball when they're playing from behind? And their offensive line is suspect at best. As the season wore on last year, it got worse, and I don't think they did much to improve it this offseason. I loved Joe Mixon coming out of college. I really thought he was a great prospect. The only question I had on him was his off the field stuff, which is, it's well documented. Everybody knows about that. But Joe Mixon, as Brandon mentioned, as you mentioned, is the bell cow. When I hear words like bell cow, volume, 30 catches as opposed to 21, 22. And I don't think Miami is going to have a good season. They appear to be in a bit of an identity crisis. And Cincinnati kind of knows where they're at. They know what they have, and Joe Mixon's one of those guys that they know that they have.
Yep, I agree with that. I think it's going to be Joe Mixon's offense, so to speak, in a lot of ways. And I just think this guy, I'm pretty high on him this year. Now that the more and more I think about it, I'm pretty high on Joe Mixon this year because I think there's going to be opportunity there. I'm not really sure how much success the team of the Bengals is going to have, but I agree with Ryan. It's probably going to be more than the Dolphins, who are probably looking at last place in that AFC East. So, and you guys are very familiar with that. So,
yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Who's going to be last then?
Well, I mean, there's a jersey right there of Ryan.
They made the playoffs last year.
I don't know. I'm not saying this for obvious reasons, but Ryan Tannehill is one knee injury away from Miami having to put in Brock Osweiler.
And that's another thing that he didn't even play all of last year.
Right. And I'm just not so. And why did they trade Jarvis Landry for a 4th and 6th or a 4th and 7th round pick? That trade boggles my mind. Whether they could.
He's juiced up now in Cleveland, baby. I don't know if y'all been watching the Hard Knock series, which I've been documenting on the website.
He's making Tyrod look good.
Man, he kind of is. He kind of is. But I'll know it just on that Hard Knocks theme real quick, guys, though. But seriously, I've been impressed what I've seen out of Tyrod Taylor because this last episode, I don't know if you guys watched it, but he really kind of stepped up in a leadership role. You know, he went to Hugh Jackson with a suggestion after practice to get under these guys' skin and to get the message across. Hugh Jackson immediately used it. So I think he's stepping up and trying to be a leader. I mean, he played good in the first preseason game. We'll see. Actually throwing the ball a little bit. Who knew? But yeah, I don't know. So
they were running a no huddle offense too in that preseason.
Trying to. I think you're going to see that.
Interesting.
You're going to see that from a few more teams this year. Tennessee's trying to be up tempo like that. I think if Deshaun Watson comes back healthy, you're going to see Houston in a mode like that as well. But we'll see. But anyway, I think it's 3 unanimous votes here. PPR, not Joe Mixon, hands down, Todd. So appreciate the question. So this last one comes from, sorry, Orlando is not here because it's a Dallas-specific question, and I had to think about this one a little bit. But it comes from Johnny DC4L, which obviously means Washington, D.C. for life, right?
Huh?
Okay. Johnny, Dallas Cowboys for life, Wilkins chimes in and says, who is the wide receiver to own in Dallas, specifically in a PPR league? Hearns, Gallup, Beasley, Williams. Dak is going to have to throw to someone. So who is that someone going to be, Dan?
Michael Gallup. He's going to be the next Dez Bryant. So he's the guy to own. He's a rookie out of Colorado State. Watched him a lot in college. Brought out an impressive draft profile leading up to the draft. He's got some talent. He is a rookie. It's hard to trust rookie receivers like that, but I think he is going to be the guy to own, especially in dynasty formats. Now, Allen Hurns is going to have some value, even Cole Beasley in some PPR formats. But Gallup has the best upside. He has the highest ceiling. And I think Dak is going to break out this year and kind of actually throw the ball downfield and really start to stretch the field. If anybody's listened to the podcast last 2 years, I'm a Cowboys fan, but I was not and have not been a believer in Dak. But I do think this is kind of be the year that he can transform that. You saw the connection with Gallup in the preseason, 30-yard touchdown against San Francisco. They seem to have built a chemistry. They work after practice together. So I like that. I like that connection not only on the field for the Cowboys, but in fantasy. I think Gallup will be the best. Hearns is still going to be a solid option. All the Cowboys receivers have fantastic values for their average draft positions, their ADPs. So you're really not going to go wrong with where they're being drafted. They're late round picks, last round picks, hundreds in the ADPs. So nobody is selecting them. Everybody's afraid because they really don't know who to take. But I would take Gallup. And listen, Brandon, I already know you're going to come back with Cole Beasley.
It ain't Gallup.
You're going to come back with Cole Beasley, I'm guessing, because you seem to like that guy. We know what Cole Beasley is. He's not – look at his stats last year. That's more representative of what he's going to do as opposed to 2 years ago.
Catch balls. He was the only one catching balls anytime I watched the Cowboys play.
He wasn't catching balls last year. He had a down year, and he was dropping balls. His catch percentage was
caught more than Dez, didn't he?
Yeah, Dez was hurt. So, but anyways, it's Michael Gallup. That's going to be the answer.
Okay, Ryan. I knew Dan was going to be so overly optimistic about this guy Gallup on the Cowboys. That was so obvious. That was so obvious. You know, he needs to come with a more realistic answer because he's talking about a dude that's fighting. He's fighting to even be first team. Dan. He's on the second team technically right now.
Who's starting over Michael Gallup? Okay. Tell me.
There's a lot of optimism.
Hard Knocks. Stop watching the JBA playoffs.
There's a lot of optimism going on right now with you and Michael Gallup. I get it. That's fine. That's more excitement though.
The Des Bryant clone, but younger and no off the field.
You need to give Johnny Wilkins something that's going to help him, not your wishes and dreams and a new poster to put up behind you during this podcast.
Be happy with Michael Gallup.
Okay, so Ryan, what do you think?
I like Michael Gallup, but I'm gonna go just deviate from Gallup, being that Dan, that's his man crush apparently. I'm gonna go with Allen Hurns just due to the fact that he's more of a veteran. I actually always liked Allen Hurns in Jacksonville. I thought he had some pretty solid seasons. He's an underneath route runner, can stretch the field as well. I'm gonna go with Allen Hurns, and mainly I think that you have to trust the guy with the most experience, and Allen Hurns, I think, has the most week in, week out big play experience in Dallas out of all the receivers that they have.
I would tend to agree a lot more with Ryan than Dan, but I'm actually going to go with my guy, Cole Beasley, because he seems to be the one catching all the balls. And now no more Dez, no more Witten, and that's the easiest throw. Cole Beasley's routes are the easiest ones that Dak's going to be able to hit. Okay, and I'm kind of with what you were trying to say, Dan, although, again, it's a new year. You're so optimistic, but Dak is what he is. And the easiest throws for Dak to be making, even this coming year, are going to be the little underneath routes and slant routes to the slot man, and that's Cole Beasley. So if you're talking about PPR and the most catches, I would feel more comfortable, with Cole Beasley on my team. The biggest production, I'm going with Ryan and Allen Hurns, the shiny new weapon. I think he's the best overall receiver left on the roster for sure. And I think I think he's just the best receiver overall. And
Brandon, let me fact check you real quick. You had said Cole Beasley had more receptions than Des Bryant last year. False. Cole Beasley. 36 catches for 314 yards, averaging 8 yards a catch with the lowest catch percentage of his career. And you're going to tell me Cole Beasley's going to be more valuable in PPR? No. Des Bryant had more receptions. Just wanted to fact check you.
How many did he have?
69 for 838 and 6. So basically more than double the production of Cole Beasley.
It's a new team.
Gallup stepping into that role, that X position.
That should have took that deal with the Ravens because he's still unemployed.
That doesn't change my theory and my thinking behind this whatsoever. No more Witten plays a huge part in that. No more Dak. And I'm sorry, coming out of what I've seen as recently as the last few days, is Gallup is fighting. Yes, he needs to be more consistent, though, to make the first team.
See that touchdown
get on the football field. You're being so optimistic with this. I still stick to my theory is the guys that are probably going to be targeted most and the easiest routes for Dak, your quarterback, is going to be Cole Beasley. If I'm drafting a receiver just overall, then I'm probably going to draft Allen Hurns. I'm not looking at Michael Gallup at this particular point.
That's why Dan's the champ.
The team has got to be made of something more than Zeke running the ball, and I think that's going to be Allen Hurns.
Who's the tight end that they got?
Dalton Schultz, but he's not going to start. It's going to be probably Jeff Swaim or Blake Jarwin as the starting tight end.
Cole Beasley. There you go, Cole Beasley. Bring back Gavin Escobar. Y'all need some help.
Gavin Escobar. I liked him. That was the dude I was thinking of. Where'd he go?
He hasn't been with
Kroger.
the Cowboys.
He's with Kroger.
he's actually with the Dolphins right now.
Oh, okay.
He'll be a treat. His nose is too big.
Okay, so I don't know if you're talking about a PPR league. I just kind of threw the Cole Beasley out there to kind of jab at Dan. Although I do think he's going to have a lot of targets and a lot of catches because that's a lot of has to do with Dak Prescott being the quarterback though. Because I don't think he's
as a Cowboys fan. I hope he has more than 36. Thanks, Cole, for nothing last year.
Well, what's also funny is none of us even mentioned the name Terrence Williams.
That dude can't even catch. That's body catcher Terrence Williams.
I'm shocked he's still on the team.
Yeah, it was terrible. They signed him to an extension last year, and it was the biggest mistake. Don't even get me started on Terrence. I can't catch with my hands, Williams.
So I think we answered that part of Johnny Wilkins' questions. Leave Terrence Williams off the equation. Dan has Gallup. Ryan has Hearns, and I said technically Beasley. That's fine. Beasley / Hearns, whatever. But go with that. But, all right, so that's just some of the taste of all the fantasy mailbag questions we've been getting here on the website. It's fantasy football season. I'm excited. I cannot wait for our draft. It's a new season of fantasy football to myfantasysportstalk.com. I won the inaugural season. Dan won the second season. This is year 3, Ryan. This is when you say it's a make or break. You either put up or shut up. So what you going to do?
The third time is the charm. The Thomas Take is not here to take part this year. He's here to take over.
Okay.
We're still waiting.
We'll see. Orlando will be saying the same thing because he's looking for that title too, as well as all of our guys are. But it'll be an interesting year. And I do think the draft, it all starts with the draft coming up Sunday night. So the next time you hear from us, guys, we'll be talking about results of the draft, break down our draft. But we're also going to be bringing out another podcast in the next few days about just what's going on the website right now, because there is a ton of fantasy football knowledge and information out there right now, Dan.
Yeah, a lot of writers stepping up, putting out a lot of great stuff. I'm bringing out rankings. Graham Sweet, another fantasy writer that we have, is bringing out rankings every day this week. So for fantasy football, we got you covered. I have a couple value picks, some late round draft targets. If you're into IDP leagues, I brought out the top 100 individual defensive players.
That was an interesting piece.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a compliment.
It definitely is. Beyond fantasy, typical fantasy value. That was just a very interesting piece, just for football in general.
Yeah, and it would. I'm actually doing my first IDP league this year, so I put some research into it to try and figure it out. But yeah, I mean, I went through.
You're basically breaking down the best individual defensive players, and just a little bit of a spoiler is what I put out there when I posted the article. J.J. Watt isn't even the top 10, folks.
No, and
listen, you
got to be on the field if you want to make my top 10, and he just hasn't been lately.
There you go. So check that out. A lot of stuff coming up, but we'll mention that also in the next podcast. We'll go over all the fantasy football news and break down some of these lists and rankings on the next My Fantasy podcast. So stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. For Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take podcast and my co-host Dan Chalk, I am Brandon Reed. Till next time. See you later. All righty.
What? Where did he go?
Did he leave? Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh my Lord.
This dude. I'm about to mail him a sticky note or something. Tell him if he wants to be a part of the second one, come back. Jeez.
Oh, God. Yeah.
It's crazy.
I mean, you gave nice instructions before we started.
I thought so. I guess I wasn't clear enough.
Now he's probably going to have technical difficulties getting back. Welcome. Hey.
What's your deal, dude?
I thought we were done. I was like, wait, is that it? And then I hung up and I was like, maybe that wasn't it. I did have to get a light drink of water, though, if I might add.
Let me tell you a tip. Generally, when we actually go off the air, we just hang around and chat for a second or two. You ain't got to just bolt straight up like.
Right. I won't bolt.
Okay. Calm down.
We're good.
So do we know the game plan for this one? So I'm going to start out with a guide. Maybe just talk a little bit about the guide, maybe go through just some of the table of contents and everything. Then I've basically got page 1 of our NFL page 1 of the website pulled up, and I was going to go up and then start with just some of the stuff that's been released lately. Like, let's see, strength of schedule, quarterbacks. That's kind of, leads off of the guide that Dan put out on August 9th. So we'll start right there. with the website stuff, and then just kind of go up, see what the next one is. Top 10, 40 tight end rankings by Dan. Let's see those IDP rankings. Go through that a little bit. Go through your defensive rankings. Then Graham Sweet's quarterback and running back rankings, and that'll be it. So just kind of hint on some of those. Just try to promote all that stuff.
Okay.
Marcus Murphy. That was a heck of a preseason game. That was awesome. My dude was tearing it up.
Who was that?
Marcus Murphy. My handcuff for the Buffalo Bills in case Shady goes out. Marcus Murphy.
All right, in case Shady doesn't show up at all.
Right.
All right, hang on one second.
Oh, hey.
The team that's going to finish second in the AFC East. Maybe playoffs. Maybe.
No. No.
You think Dak's going to have a good year this year?
Yeah. I do.
I think he'll be all right. Should be all right.
When you come to my stag, we're doing a basket raffle of Bills memorabilia.
Sweet. I'll definitely chip in for that.
Huh? Yeah.
You know I'm down.
And
down for some memorabilia.
You can get a Rex Ryan bobblehead too.
That's awesome.
Maybe you want CJ Spiller.
CJ Spiller. It was when he was number 28. That was before his fifth stint with the Chiefs.
Oh, yeah.
All righty. We ready?
Yes.
Ready.
We all have the game plan?
We got the game plan.
We're ready to stick around to the end?
Yep.
All right, let's go another one. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. And welcome back to another My Fantasy podcast from myfantasysportstalk.com. It's fantasy football season, so we are back with more fantasy football knowledge that I'm gonna have to soak up real soon. I've got the guide downloaded here. I've got about 17 tabs on my web browser pulled up, studying all this fantasy football knowledge because our draft is this coming Sunday night. So I've got to step up. I've got one title. Dan took the crown last year, so I can't afford to have Dan talking all that trash for yet another calendar year. It's going to drive me crazy. I'm your host, Brandon Reed. My co-host is Daniel Schalk, our editor-in-chief. So what's the plan this year, man? Are you going to just take the title again and break hearts, or are you going to take it easy on us?
Listen, last year I didn't even put in half of the amount of work I've put in this year. Obviously, we brought out the MFST's first draft guide. The site is blowing up right now with fantasy information. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious, guys. I mean, I hate to burst your bubble before we even draft, but
you've also been giving away a lot of what's in your head in this draft guide.
Yeah, but obviously we recorded a show not too long ago, Brandon, and you mentioned Cole Beasley, so obviously not everything I'm saying isn't penetrating through. So I hope that for the rest of the guys in our league.
I'll be keeping a close eye on Michael Gallup for the rest of the year and see how that turns out for you.
And it'll turn out you'll both be wrong, and I'll get Allen Hurns and he'll ball.
I mean, Alan Hearns is still the guy to grab. But anyway, you'll have to go back and listen to our last podcast, watch our last podcast, and we answered the mailbag questions. That's up right now, the August mailbag question segment, as we went into some fantasy football based on you guys' questions. So we appreciate those and keep them coming. We'll answer as many as we can, as often as we can. But that guy you just heard from is Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take. You ready for Sunday?
I was born ready. April 30th, 1992. I was born ready. How about that?
April 30th. That was that's man, that's hard of baseball season. I don't know. We ain't got no football going on right there, so I don't know.
It's right during draft weekend. What are you talking about?
That is true. That is true. That is true. You were a drafted baby. You were a drafted baby. Ready to start it all. Man, yeah. Now I'm kind of scared. Now I'm kind of scared, Dan. Now that he puts it like that.
I've been scared.
Hey, Ryan was, I'll say this, Ryan was, if you will be humble enough to admit this and reflect back, Dan, that Ryan was pretty much at top of the standings all year, our first year, until yours truly knocked him out of the playoffs, bounced him unceremoniously about the championship.
It was not a good day.
All I remember was something about losing a lot of games last year, drafting Adrian Peterson after I repeatedly said he's done. That's all that jogs my memory.
It wasn't even one of my starters, though, until later in the year when everyone got hurt. It wasn't fair.
So all the losses before
at that point in the season, I was forced to start AP because there wasn't anybody left over. It was not pretty.
Hey, and so, I don't think I actually drafted Eddie Lacy, Dan. I was just talking, just a little bit of chatter. Yeah, I didn't actually do it.
Good, because he would have weighed down your bench too much.
Hey, last year he was looking a little more fit,
I need depth. That's what I need, depth. That's the goal.
Okay. So we've made some changes in our fantasy league, too. The rules went through, Dan. You're going to submit the rule. We have an IR spot now. What do we have? 30 acquisitions?
Two IR
spots. Okay, so we went from 0 to 2.
I foresaw complaining during the NFL season, and I just put it out of the way right now. So 2 IR spots, 30 moves. 30 moves have gone through.
It seems like we made another. Yeah, go ahead.
Commish vetoes only, no votes.
Only, yeah. I mean, I trust you, Dan. I never not had any trust in you as the commissioner, Dan. But you should never, ever allow other owners to veto trades because they're all going to have their own interest. That is crazy. Imagine if the world really worked like that. I
was trying to be more Bill Clinton than Hitler. So this year I'm going for it.
I don't care. What my thing is, you don't veto any trade unless it's obviously lopsided. But that also, to me, that's if someone wants to make even what appears to be a lopsided trade in the first 8-9 weeks, I don't care. That's up to you. But now when you talk about people, making lopsided trades to playoff teams from people who are not in playoff teams, then you have to look at, collusion a little bit. But as far as just two guys that think they're bettering their teams, no other owner should have a say in that at all. Period. So I think we've corrected that, and I trust your judgment, Dan.
Yeah.
I trust it too. I trust it.
I mean, having an IR spot is huge to me. Just that alone.
2 spots, just for you.
And then last year was also the only time I've ever played in a league. I don't think we did this the first year where you had an acquisition limit. We did the first year, and you expanded it because everybody hit their limit at like week 8, and it was like, what the hell, Dan? I mean, what is this?
I didn't expect so many incompetent drafters. I mean, their teams were terrible. They had to do something. So.
I mean, that's unfair, Dan. Everyone, even if you don't suffer injury, is watching every Sunday and saying, ooh, so-and-so went off or so-and-so got hurt, and the backup may be the guy. Everyone wants to get that guy on their team.
Made like 8 moves last year and won the ship. Next.
Well, good for you. You drafted really well. But the draft should not be the end all be all.
365 days.
The draft should not be
the end all strike twice.
What?
I said lightning doesn't strike twice.
Oh.
Well, he nailed Kareem Hunt last year. He also, what was the other big running back you had that really kind of maybe outperformed expectations a little bit?
I don't even remember. My team was just too stacked all up
You
and down.
really had a deadly 1-2 combination there at running back.
I think I had Todd Gurley.
Not Gurley, yes, bounce back year. There you go. So you pegged Todd Gurley to have a huge bounce back year, check, and you also pegged Kareem Hunt to be the man, check, as he was through the first 2/3 of the season anyway. But yeah, way to go. So that won the ship. So I said that the draft is not the end all be all, but it kind of really is the start of the foundation. And so that's where we're all at now in fantasy football, is making our drafts. If you've already drafted, I'm sorry, because if some of you potential Darius Geis owners out there drafted Darius Geis, then you're royally screwed at this point. So, well, you probably didn't take him too high, but anyway, that's just what I'm trying to convey. The message I'm trying to convey rather, is with these early draft is, say you draft David Johnson on Sunday, Dan, which you get the number 1 pick. I think you just might do, and he gets hurt again in the third quarter of the third preseason game. You're screwed. You're screwed, Dan. So not for these early drafts, but if we're faced with it, we got to do it anyway. So that's the point we're at, and we're going to do it Sunday, Dan. So I recommend it. You better have at least 14 purchases from that draft guide from all 14 guys in our league. I know that.
I don't know if we do. I do not know, but the draft guide is filled with a bunch of information. I'm glad some of them aren't using it, because that'll give us a leg up on the competition. 80 pages of just jam-packed stuff. Not only me contributing to it with ranking, strength of schedule, some team previews, but you, Brandon, you contributed, and that Bills jersey wearing guy, Ryan Thomas, he even contributed to it. And I know when he comes on, he's just going to spit out Marcus Murphy. So it was actually a good read. So if you do happen to want some draft,
it was a great read.
Great read, yes, great. I was
so let me ask you real quick before we get too sidetracked. I'm just really interested in your take on this, and you could chime in too, Dan, if you want to, if you're paying attention. But so, what is the quarterback outlook looking in Buffalo now? I mean, what is the more favorable situation right now through one preseason game?
Well, Nate Peterman started the first preseason game, and he went 7 for 8. His last pass attempt was kind of behind the receiver, but it still hit the receiver in the hands. Hit the receiver, went off his hands, interception. That was his last pass of the game. A.J. McCarron showed that he could lead the offense down the field. He definitely showed that he's the more experienced out of the three.
And should be the starter.
Methodically.
Right. I mean, technically should be the starter based on, you went out
based on the fact that he's paid his dues. He sat behind Andy Dalton when there were moments where he probably could have made a case to start some weeks here and there when Dalton was struggling. But they're really high on Nate Peterman, and they're really high, obviously, on Josh Allen.
But all the fans are like you, wearing what jersey you got on?
Well, I know Josh Allen's the future. That's all. You got to embrace the future.
That puts A.J. McCarron and Nathan Peterman in a tough situation. I'll just let you know, as an outside perspective.
Right. Well, AJ only signed on a 2-year deal, and Nate Peterman was a backup last year, and as of now, he's not a true starter. He just started the first preseason game. So the jury's still out, but 5 of the first 7 games are on the road. I don't know if they're going to be willing to throw Josh Allen into that circumstance. I'd compare it to with the Rams. They started Jared Goff week 11, his rookie year. And the situation was a little bit different. Their coaching situation was different, but I think we could see Josh Allen start maybe in the middle of the season, depending on the Bills' record.
It's a lot to work out and sort out. I think you have 3 fairly good options that you're not quite sure which one is going to pan out yet. So
right.
you're gonna have the whole season to work that out. The preseason's not going to get that done. It's just not.
No. Yeah, you're right. I agree. I think that the preseason's not going to work it out, but they got to see what Nate's got, because that Chargers game was abysmal. It was a disaster. It was a snowball effect game. But then there were moments in other games when he relieved Tyrod Taylor against the Saints. He played pretty well. When he played in the snow game against the Colts, for it being, it looked like 12 inches of snow on the field, he played pretty well considering. So there's a lot to kind of iron out, but I think they're avoiding putting Josh Allen out there on an island by himself with their offensive line kind of in a state of transition, not in a state of disarray, state of transition.
No doubt, but most fans don't want to hear that. He's the shiny new toy. They want to see him. They're buying the jerseys just like you.
Right. I want to see him play. If it were me, I'd put him out there right away. I don't believe in, this rookie's got to learn and hold a clipboard. It's 2018, rookies play and
Hey,
they usually play well.
If you I mentioned last podcast, but if you watch that Hard Knock series following the Cleveland Browns, I got the articles up on the first 2 episodes right now. Third one coming soon.
Yeah, those are very well done, by the way, too.
Appreciate that. I mean, I love that series. Anything uncensored that I love. But Baker Mayfield is surprising me, y'all. He is looking sharp. Had a first sharp preseason game and looks to be playing the part as far as off the field stuff as well. You just have to watch the series to see what I mean. But I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised by Baker Mayfield. Although I think your boy Tyrod should still be the starter there because of what he's shown as well. But I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Baker Mayfield too. But Dan, what do you think about the quarterback situation in Buffalo before we move on and start talking about some rankings and other things?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put Josh Allen out there on the field as a rookie at all. I mean, he was my number 1 quarterback in the NFL draft. I think he has a lot of promise, but he's not ready. He's raw. He's still a raw quarterback. He could use a year just to sit back and learn and take in an NFL system and just work on some technique things that he needs, like footwork. His footwork still is not where it needs to be. Progressions, things like that. So I wouldn't rush him out there. The Bills aren't going anywhere quick. They have to build up to this. So you have money invested into AJ McCarron, and you have Nate Peterman there. If he looks good enough, have those 2 guys take the majority of the hits. Ryan said that the Bills' offensive line is in a rebuilding. They're terrible. They have a terrible offensive line.
No, they're bad.
I would not put Josh Allen out there. Like he said, 5 of the first 6 on the road, and it's against some good defenses. I think Jacksonville is part of that. Maybe even a Seattle. There's some good teams that they play within that those first weeks. So I wouldn't just let them learn, let them sit back and take in an NFL season without being thrown out to the wolves.
Yeah, not week one. Not week one.
Yeah, like I said, I think you kind of have to let that play out. So you guys mentioned the offensive line discrepancies and deficiencies rather for Buffalo. But I just said on the last podcast that the Miami Dolphins are going to finish last in the AFC East. Dan disagreed. You have Buffalo. You seriously have Buffalo finishing last?
Buffalo or the Jets. I think they're going to be the bottom feeders of the division.
So you think Miami's going to be number 2?
Yep.
You got more confidence in them from somewhere than I do. I don't know where it's coming from.
Well, I like Tannehill. I think he's a top 15 type quarterback. I mean, he's gotten them to the playoffs before. He can do it. He did get hurt, so he wasn't even able to play in the playoff game. But he can definitely lead that offense. I like Drake. I like their weapons on the outside. When you look at Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills, they added Amendola, Albert Wilson, Mike Gesicki, the rookie tight end, is going to turn some heads this year, and their defense is actually pretty solid. Raekwon McMillan is a big guy to watch for. He lost his rookie season last year, but he had over 100 tackles in all 4 years at Ohio State. He's going to be a monster in the middle. So I like what the Dolphins are doing quietly. They're not making any moves, but I like how they're building their team.
Yeah, the only reason they were even in and won a few games last year is because of that defense. They were just in straight up dog fights. But I gotta think you disagree with that though, right, Ryan? I mean, your Buffalo Bills made the playoffs this past year. They're not going to fall from playoff to
lost a lot.
AFC. They lost a lot. They lost Incognito, who lost his mind. So if anything, that was a win. Eric Wood, I was never really high on, to be quite honest, as far as a player in the locker room, great guy, all that stuff. But I wouldn't say he was due. This was probably his last year. Maybe next year would have been his last year. It kind of sucked. It was unfortunate the way he went out. But I think Buffalo's defense is better on paper and on the field this year than it was last year. They got Harrison Phillips, who was a stud at Stanford. Trey Edmonds is a linebacker that Dan knows a lot about. He rated him as the number 1, as did I. Trey White should have been the defensive rookie of the year last year, in my opinion. You put Pro Football Focus stuff up, they are in love with Trey White. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. the real question, I think, is the loss of EJ Gaines. They lost EJ Gaines. He kind of missed some games last year. They weren't willing to re-sign him. They signed Vontae Davis, who is not EJ Gaines. In the games that EJ Gaines was in, the Bills went 6-1 last year. So that's something to keep our eye on. But I like Buffalo's defense a lot better than Miami's, to be quite honest.
There you go. So let's talk about these rankings a little bit. If you have not checked out the guide, I recommend you go to myfantasysportstalk.com, especially if you haven't drafted, and purchase this guide because there's so much, 80 pages. And I'm going to go through the table of contents here, just exactly what's in this guide. Even if you have drafted and have not yet purchased the guide, I recommend you do because there's still a lot of great knowledge for you, even going in the future, maybe making some pre-season trades or whatever. But the proceeds go to the Wounded Warrior Project and Susan G. Komen Foundation. So it's just a great cause for just $1. And then Dan also put a pretty picture of Josh Gordon on the front of the cover as well. So that's worth $1 right there. But we go through it all. We get quarterback rankings, running back rankings, wide receiver rankings, tight end rankings. And then you have the strength of schedules of all those positions. You have rookie rankings, the running back handcuffs, which we've talked about with Ryan actually on this show a couple of times. Breakout or bust segment, bold predictions, draft day tips, which I will be reading that several times between now and Sunday. You also have your defensive and kicker rankings if you're so inclined, if you really care. And basically all the NFL team previews done by all of our writers here at myfantasysportstalk.com. So that is great information there. That's a big chunk of our fantasy guide, so check that out too. You go through the bye weeks, see who those are, sleepers, later round draft targets, and there's actually a buyer beware segment that Dan threw in there, and it is for Ryan's LeSean McCoy. So, and that was even before the latest legal situation, right, Dan?
Yeah, that was before he wanted to throw a hit down on his old lady. So allegedly.
I saw something this week on that. I think either her family's lawyer is suing LeSean McCoy.
She's suing McCoy for. I mean, it sounds like a kind of stupid lawsuit. I'm not legal enough to understand it, but it seemed like a little ridiculous. But hey, Zeke got suspended 6 games for it, no charges. No evidence, text messages saying I'm doing this for money, and he got suspended 6 games. It's similar evidence from what I've seen right now from McCoy. So unless it's Roger Goodell going after the Cowboys and Jerry Jones, McCoy should see a similar fate in my mind.
Yep. You have a thought on that, Ryan? I mean, are you even considering touching LeSean McCoy? Say you have the 11th pick in the draft Sunday night. Are you touching LeSean McCoy?
No, I'm not touching him. He's on the wrong side of 30. I talked about, I like to play a little sarcastic twist on things sometimes, but I know as well as anybody, I was right there at the training camp. Buffalo's offensive line is not what it was last year. They have some rookies that they're putting in. Wyatt Teller did some decent things, but they're in a state of disarray / transition, and I'm not going to use a first, second, or third on LeSean McCoy as long as I know that he's on the wrong side of 30 and as long as I know that offensive line is not what it once was.
I think that's the key to it right there. Different day there.
Not even talking about the legal stuff, because I actually think that time will tell, but I'm not even taking the legal stuff into the equation. I'm not even putting that into the equation. I'm just looking at it from a X's and O's standpoint.
Okay, so let's jump into some fantasy stuff and break down some of these lists and rankings. So I encourage you all to definitely check out the guide, buy the guide for $1 and download it and check it out. You can have it in a matter of 15 seconds from right now if you go. But so the first thing I want to do is break down not Dan's rankings of the quarterbacks themselves, but a separate article that's on the website right now, as we're giving you a little sneak peek of the guide, is the quarterback strength of schedules. And number one The Jacksonville Jaguars, Blake Bortles, according to Dan, has the easiest strength of schedules for a quarterback, even though his name is Blake Bortles. He trash, Dan. He trash. Where did this come from, Dan?
Well, I mean, this isn't just me doing this. I mean, this is actual data based on the schedules. So, I mean, this is a formula that was actually made on strength of schedule. It can be found one of the websites I write for, Fantasy Pros. They do a great job on all of their stuff, and this is where they formulated this formula for me. So
they must think the AFC South is going to suck.
Well, their competition is going to be a little rough, and obviously, I think in the first top 10, you have multiple.
Who's the NFC division they're matched up against this year? That may tell a lot too.
Yeah, it will tell a lot. I don't know offhand who it is, but Jaguars and Blake Bortles being number one in strength of schedule doesn't mean go out and select Blake Bortles as your starting quarterback or anything like that. But the way I would look at it is, so Blake Bortles and the Jaguars have the easiest strength of schedule for quarterbacks. When you go down and you see the Rams at 27th and Jared Goff, I'm not high on Jared Goff this year. That would be where I would compare those two players and, towards the end of your draft and say, which guy am I going to get?
Why are you not high on Goff? You think it's because he lost his offensive coordinator?
That's one. I think the NFL is going to crack down on McVay getting in his head, literally walking up to the line of scrimmage, audibling him and telling him where to go. The NFL isn't going to be allowing that anymore. The defenses, they just have another year of film on them. McVay's system is successful, but just like when he was in Washington, that second year, it's not as good. So he had this season, McVay's first season of unbelievable production, but I don't think that's going to be reciprocated the same way. The Rams are still going to be good. They're going to be led by that amazing defense, and they're going to probably shut down a lot of teams, so they're not going to have to pass a lot. And I just think Goff, we saw him as a rookie. He obviously made a step forward, but I don't think it's going to be a continual progression up. Jared Goff is nothing more than a game manager. He's a lower-level Alex Smith in my mind as his career stretches out. So, listen, Brandon, you watched Hard Knocks with the Rams a few years ago. You know the type of player that Goff was then. Obviously, he's progressed, but still.
I was so shocked last year. I mean, last year was such what the hell am I seeing?
Yeah, but I think that was more McVay than actually Goff doing it, and I think teams are going to start to figure that out a little bit more.
I would have to agree. The answer to the question of who the NFC division is that the Jaguars play this year is your own NFC East, Dan. They start actually their first inter-league, I guess you would say, or conference game is against your Dallas Cowboys at Dallas, October 14th. But
that's a W for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know where this initially strength of schedule comes from. So they start out at New York. Okay, well, I kind of see that. I mean, the Browns just beat them in a preseason game, so New York may be struggling again this year. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But second game is against New England, and then they play their first conference game. Starts out with the Tennessee Titans. So I don't know. I think the NFC East is going to be pretty damn decent. I mean, you got the defending champs there, Philadelphia Eagles, which are going to be stacked again. You got Dan's Cowboys, and then the Redskins in there as well. And who knows what they're going to be. But I don't think that's the worst conference you can pick on if you're talking about the NFC division. So I don't know. I don't think that's just initially a horrible schedule. So they must be really down on the AFC South. That lets me know a little bit. That's why these rankings are so important, I guess. But anyway, just kind of go through the top 10 real quick. Washington Redskins are number 2, supposedly. So they have the second worst strength of schedule. So Alex Smith, look out. Houston, Texas. So it is a theme here, I'm noticing. So check this out. Carson Wentz has the 5th easiest schedule for a quarterback. this year, guys. Carson Wentz for the Philadelphia Eagles. So what I'm seeing is that this ranking system is down on the NFC East and the AFC South, because number 2 is Alex Smith, the Washington Redskins. Number 3 is Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans. Number 5 is Philadelphia and Carson Wentz. So I don't know. Have you had a chance to look through these quarterback rankings, and how much do you schedule rankings, and how much do you put into strength of schedule rankings before a draft, Ryan?
I look into it a little bit, but I really look into the numbers as far as where they finished last season. What's really intriguing about this year is that if you look at this ranking, you have Alex Smith at number 2. Kirk Cousins threw for over 4,000 yards in that offense in Washington in consecutive seasons. Alex Smith, as the season ended, was a top quarterback for fantasy. I believe he was top 7. So that's very interesting to me. They just lost their rookie running back, Darius Geis, but they also added Paul Richardson and a couple other pieces here and there. That one kind of grasped my attention, because although he's 34, technically the amount of years, the couple years there where he sat behind Colin Kaepernick, Alex Smith is as fresh as a daisy, in my opinion, for a 34-year-old quarterback. I don't think the Redskins are going to blow the roof off the NFL or anything like that. I'm just talking from a fantasy perspective. They should be throwing a lot in Washington. They should be throwing a lot.
Okay. So let's transition there. Again, check out the website. That's up on the website, myfantasysportstalk.com. I don't give away much on that. You pretty much get the gist of that to check out who the easiest quarterback schedules are. Just if you're leaning, or having a tough decision on one quarterback or another as far as when you're drafting in the upcoming weeks, that might help you out a little bit and push you over the edge and solidify your selection in your head. Anyway, none of us never know, but let's move on. We'll talk about the top 40 tight end rankings. And I love this one, Dan, because this is one of the positions I think every year could really put you over that hump as a team, or you could just be struggling like I have the last few years and just placing a new tight end in every other game. So unless you have one of those elite guys, then I'm just not sure it really matters much. But you still believe, this is Dan's tight end rankings, that Rob Gronk is the number 1 hands down. If he's on the field, he's number 1.
Yeah, I mean, he played in 14 games last year and still had more points than the next closest tight end by double digits. So when he's on the field, he's the number 1 tight end. I mean, there's some other good ones like Kelsey and Olsen and Evan Ingram I'm high on. But I mean, when he is on the football field, it's Rob Gronkowski and it's everybody else.
And I thought you were a little down on Greg Olsen last year, but you got him sneaking into number 5. A little surprise there, Dan.
Yeah, well, good thing I was down on him last year because he was terrible. He was hurt.
Well, he was out, yeah.
So that turned out well. But, yeah, I'm expecting a bounce back here. He doesn't have many years left. But the Panthers, they've tried to get some talent to their receiving core with DJ Moore. They drafted Ian Thomas out of Indiana, another tight end who has a bright future. But still, right now, Greg Olsen is Cam Newton's safety net. He's the guy that he's going to look for when he's in trouble. So a top 5 tight end status is almost guaranteed with Greg Olsen in my mind, as long as he's healthy.
Another guy you're extremely high on is George Kittle, which he has a quarterback now, I would say, in a franchise that's going to need some offensive production from somewhere. Why not the quarterback to tight end combination in San Francisco? That's George Kittle. You got him at number 6.
Yeah, I have him higher than anybody else you'll find anywhere. I love George Kittle this year. I'm not afraid to put him in my top 10. Most of them have him just outside the top 10. I have him as the 6th best tight end in fantasy this year. It concerned me in the first playoff game. The Cowboys defense gave him a little whooping, and he hurt his shoulder, but he should be back by week 1. And he was able to develop some chemistry with Jimmy Garoppolo last year when he took over the starting quarterback duties. And basically all of his production came with Jimmy G, and he had 43 catches for over 500 yards in that small sample size. So I love Kittle's ability, not only talent on the field, but in that system. Kyle Shanahan knows how to find receivers and tight ends open, and I think he has the perfect quarterback there to be able to get him the ball. So I'm very high on George Kittle this year.
And another one real quick before we move on to Ryan and get his take on these tight ends is Jack Doyle, which I'm a little surprised on, Dan. You're very high on him as well, higher than I would ever be for an Indianapolis Colts tight end because they just don't use the position. You gave the numbers there on his breakdown over the last 2 years, and that really kind of astonished me because the Colts, they just never seem to be a team that used and utilized the tight end position. I mean, Andrew Luck had his college buddy come along with him and start in the league, Coby Fleener, and that never even worked out. So if your college teammate and someone you're familiar with just didn't work out, I'm a little skeptical of the Colts consistently using that tight end position, and especially now that they added Eric Ebron. So I'm a little surprised that Jack Doyle, you got him number 9.
Well, you look at the numbers, 174 receptions in 2 years. He's getting used. He was a top 6 tight end last year, and that was without Andrew Luck. Add Andrew Luck into the equation, I just think his numbers are going to be very consistent. You have T.Y. Hilton. Other than that, you have a guy named Ryan Grant as your number 2 receiver.
Sure, there's Eric Ebron. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's also that was without Eric Ebron.
Ever done in Detroit with Matthew Stafford throwing the ball? Nothing.
If Andrew Luck comes back healthy, then I think watch out for Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron may be more productive, should be more productive as far as I'm concerned from a talent standpoint than Jack Doyle. So the question is Andrew Luck. We'll see. But again, they never seem to utilize the tight end position to me. We'll find out. But that kind of scares me. Any Indianapolis Colt tight end being in the top 10. But hey, you had the numbers to back it up. Ryan, what do you think about this tight end breakdown and just tight end rankings, how you feel about it altogether going into this season? Is it even a position that you're really even keying in on and when you're talking about your fantasy draft?
Well, you got to definitely value it because it's a position that's in your lineup every week. You got to kind of find the sweet spot when you're drafting. And
kind of like defenses, though. If you don't get the top 3, 4, 5 elite, then it almost doesn't matter.
Right. Well, there's always a diamond out there, a diamond in the rough. And as I scroll down outside of the top 10, I look at Tyler Eifert. This is a guy that I think he's uber talented, can be just as good when healthy as a Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski. But the guy just cannot stay healthy. Another guy that I think that I'm high on, and I hate saying this because I don't want to give anything away, but David Njoku in Hard Knocks, that dude, they're putting him through the ringer this year. They don't give a rat's if he was a first-round pick out of the U.
I think he can be their most consistent weapon on offense.
There's even with Jarvis Landry, with depending on when Josh Gordon comes back, I think David Njoku is a guy that will definitely get targets. And he's a physical freak. He's a monster. And I definitely think that that's a guy I'm really high on. He hasn't had any injuries as of yet. He's a fairly young player. So Njoku, I'm hoping that Eifert could have somewhat of a bounce back year. And another guy, Jordan Reed. I'd say Jordan Reed and Tyler Eifert are like the same player. They're so talented, but they just can't stay healthy. But those are 3 guys that I would be willing to take a chance on late if they fall.
So let's move on and we'll go back to the quarterbacks because this quarterback ranking system, we talked about strength of schedules a little bit before, but we're going to talk about actual quarterback rankings. Now, this is not from the guide. This is our Graham Sweet, a contributor, NFL contributor, and writer for the site, myfantasysportstalk.com, who contributed this list and ranks the quarterbacks. That he ranked his top 30, so check that out on the website right now, myfantasysportstalk.com. I like where he's going with this. It all makes sense to me. He has Aaron Rodgers number 1. I believe Aaron Rodgers is the baddest quarterback. I don't care. I thought he was the last 3 years, Tom Brady or whatever. I think Aaron Rodgers, when healthy, is the most accurate, pinpoint, precise, badass quarterback that there is in the league. He has him number 1. Tom Brady number 2 for obvious reasons because he just keeps going. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going. And Russell Wilson number 3. Who can argue with that? He was right there at the top of the fantasy production for quarterbacks among all fantasy players last year. Then he took a big step with Carson Wentz, hopefully bounce back under center. I've said this before on the podcast. Under center, Carson Wentz seems to have it. He seems to have that it factor and total control, like a la Tom Brady, a la Peyton Manning. Just sees it, adjust, and he executes. And Drew Brees, number 5. Kirk Cousins surprises me a little bit at number 6. With the Vikings, I don't see that one. Deshaun Watson, if healthy, I kind of agree they're coming in at 7. Cam Newton, 8. Jimmy G, which Dan may have this guy ranked about the same or in that neighborhood anyway at number 9, definitely in the top 10. Then Matt Ryan rounds out his top 10. Andrew Luck falls just outside that at 11. So what did you think of Graham's quarterback rankings, Dan? Anything you take immediate exception to, or how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely disagreed on just about all of our rankings. I mean, I have Tom Brady as my number 1. I have Russell Wilson as my 5th as opposed to his 3rd. I don't have Kirk Cousins in my top 10. I have him 11th. Now, it's justified. He says back-to-back 4,000-yard seasons, but Kirk Cousins never thrown for 30 touchdowns in a career or in a season in his career. He has some weapons in Minnesota, but I see more of them as a fluke last year rather than this gaudy offense that is going to be able to put up a ton of points. With
that kind of caught up to them with Adam Thielen. You saw last year Adam Thielen the first couple of weeks put up huge numbers. The league kind of caught up to them in their system and in their scheme. So, yeah, first few weeks they were just really going off. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't see that as just a major offense juggernaut either.
Yeah, so I mean, we have some of the same guys. We both have Jimmy G in the top 10. He's my 6th ranked quarterback. I have Deshaun Watson 4th, where he has him 7th. So some differences, but that's what I like about it. I like the writers bringing out their own other writers bringing out their own rankings because it gives you a comparison of different thoughts on my fantasy sports talk of where we all think, and we're pretty close, but there are definitely some differences. So take it all. Look at the ones from the Draft Guide, the ones I published on the site, and Graham's, and kind of compare and contrast there, and you can kind of craft your team that way.
So you mentioned the few discrepancies you have, but really, honestly, you guys aren't that too far off. If you're talking about guys within the top 8 or so, I think that's pretty good. Now, you mentioned Kirk Cousins, like I mentioned Kirk Cousins. I don't think Kirk Cousins belongs number 6 or in the top 10. To me, we'll see. I just don't see that. So I think that's one of the biggest differences you mentioned. 3 or 4 spots, I'll let that slide. But from this list, what do you see that's the most furthest apart from the way you had your quarterback rankings and the biggest discrepancy that you could tell offhand, if you can remember offhand? So what about Jared Goff? He has him 16, Marcus Mariota 17. I mean, what's the biggest discrepancy?
I have Jared Goff 27th.
That's pretty big. That's a pretty big discrepancy then.
I have Matt Ryan. He is in his top 10. I have Matt Ryan 17th. So that's a little bit of a discrepancy. I have Dak Prescott in my top 15. So there are some differences definitely between the both of our rankings. But yeah, Jared Goff is a big one. Tyrod Taylor is another big one. He has him 29th. I have him 20th. I think he's going to do
Eli Manning. What about Eli Manning at 22?
I have him 23. So we're
okay.
Similar there. Yeah, so it's not too crazy, but you kind of get the different ideals there.
Where did you say Jared Goff was for you?
27.
Yeah, so you're a good 11 spots off there. Ryan, from everything you've seen, how would you categorize these quarterbacks, just from what we've talked about there in the ranking list you've seen?
I am a sucker for a good quarterback. It's my favorite position in the league. So fantasy football drafts, I have sometimes overdrafted, which I did last year in the my fantasy sports talk league. I drafted Tom Brady very high. I believe it was the 2nd or 3rd round. It's great to have a Rodgers or a Brady or one of the elite names, but I'm trying to look at this year who I see has the most potential to offer me more than just passing yards and touchdowns. I'm looking for quarterbacks that can move. 2 guys that come to mind, and call me crazy on this, but 2 guys that are definitely going to be used often and that are going to provide a lot of points in other ways, Mitch Trubisky and Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes, the strength of schedule, by that article, he's at the bottom. But I know Dan's a fan of Pat Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech. I think with that offense, with Kareem Hunt, with Kelsey, with Sammy Watkins, with Tyreek Hill, there's a lot to gain there, and there's more room for him to grow to where he could be a guy that teams don't draft in maybe an 8 or 10 team league, and you could pick him up and ride him the rest of the season.
There you go.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's very good points. So just kind of thinking outside the box, and that quarterback position is one you technically could go undrafted and then maybe pick up one of the guys that wasn't drafted. Because honestly, in a 14-man league, in our league, I'm not sure that Patrick Mahomes is going to get drafted. I mean, what do you think that's a for surefire thing?
I
don't think so.
I think he would. I think he would late, like 9th, 10th round, which I think would be an absolute steal for someone that gets him. But like Mitch Trubisky too. I talked about him. He's got added weapons. They got Allen Robinson. They have
Anthony Miller,
Jordan Howard, and Anthony Miller. Right. So my thing is, heading into this season, more than any other year, I could honestly say I'm going to try to buy low and just let it flow. I mean, last year I started Josh McCown over Matt Ryan multiple times, and it was never wrong. There were weeks where you just play the matchups, obviously, and Josh McCown would have some bigger weeks due to the matchup in comparison to Matt Ryan. So, got to ride those matchups.
You never know. There's going to be talent left out there undrafted, because there's been several years in the last several years that Eli Manning has gone undrafted in some leagues I'm in. Other guys like Andy Dalton, which I may have got crap about that last year, but I mean, still, there's quality stuff out there that's going to be left undrafted because no one wants to buy into 2 quarterbacks during their initial draft. So there's going to be some guys out there. So buy low, let it flow from B-Lo. That's Ryan Thomas. That's a nice quote.
Yeah, there. Buy low from B-Lo. That was a nice quote.
Buy low, let it flow from B-Lo. There you go. So let's move on. We'll talk about some running back rankings before we end this one. Again, we're just kind of giving you a whirlwind tour of myfantasysportstalk.com right now. We're not going to give you everything because we can't. There's so much fantasy stuff out there right now on the website. I just can't possibly tell you everything in this podcast. So, but this article is the running back rankings from Graham Sweet. One I know you're going to take immediate exception to, Dan, is that he has David Johnson number 6. I know you don't like that or agree with that at all.
Graham, you're fired. Yeah. So that happened. It's wrong. Don't listen to his rankings on this one. David Johnson will be the number 1 running back in fantasy. It's going to happen. He's going to have 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving. He's going to be the Cardinals' offense. So draft with confidence.
And then to add further insult to injury and rub it in your face a little bit further, Dan, he has a guy you're not high on, really, not top 5 high on, Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, he's my 6th ranked running back. Just way too many questions. Yeah, when he's on the field, he's great, but he's holding out. He did, and he always has some type of injury issues. He's a puff away from a suspension. He likes to focus more on his rap career sometimes. There's just too many questions, and a decline is due. It's just for him, for Antonio Brown, for Roethlisberger, the whole Steelers team is every year I predict a decline. Well, this year it's going to happen.
It's Pittsburgh for you. It's New England for me. I got you. We're neither one are really right yet. Pittsburgh was pretty close last year. They were in the thick of the hunt. So, but his number 2 is Todd Gurley, which you fell back down on, which I was surprised by because he carried you to fantasy glory last year in large part, Todd Gurley, but you're saying not so fast for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I still have Todd Gurley as a top 5 back. He's my 4th overall running back. You just do not see back-to-back number 1 running back seasons. It hasn't been done since 2007 when LaDainian Tomlinson went off. It just doesn't happen back-to-back number 1s. He's still going to be a great a great back to own, surefire first-round pick, surefire top 5 pick. But he's just not going to be the number 1 overall pick. It just doesn't happen like that. So I'm still high on him, but he shouldn't be the 1st overall.
So, Ryan, your boy here, this may be a little high. I don't know. You tell me. But LaShawn McCoy comes in at 16.
I would rank him inside the more 18 to 20 range.
Well, it's pretty close then. So you still think he has enough suspension looming regardless to be a top 20 fantasy producing.
Suspension looming. I'm not taking any chances on a dude with a suspension, no matter who it is. It could
not at all.
Gale Sayers.
You did last year, didn't you? You did last year,
right? Not doing it again. Nope. Nope, I learned my lesson. This is learning Ryan, not past 2017 Ryan. This is learning Ryan. Ryan does learn, believe it or not. And one guy that I wrote this article a couple weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, and maybe I was a little bit bullish on Alvin Kamara, but this guy literally was my kryptonite. No matter when I played him, no matter what matchup he was in, he averaged in a PPR league 25 to 30 points. I think Alvin Kamara has got to be ranked in the top 3, top 4 with David Johnson, Zeke Elliott, and Todd Gurley. That's my top 4. That's how it's got to be. I can't not give Kamara that props for the year that he had last year, and it wasn't even a full season.
So good transition there. We'll go ahead and mention that he does have Alvin Kamara number 5. So he does. Graham does have him in at the top 5. And what I was looking for a little bit earlier is to see just how far he has his sidekick, Mark Ingram. We don't even know how that's exactly going to work out yet. We think Alvin Kamara is the future, but he had Mark Ingram way down at 30. Is that representable? I mean, do you think Alvin Kamara is going to be that much more fantasy value than Mark Ingram? Can anyone truly say that at this point?
I don't think
Mark Ingram's for the first 4 games. So that makes a big impact.
I mean, that hurts, but I mean, to have a guy like LaShawn McCoy in there at number 6 who could be facing suspension as well. I mean, the truth is when Mark Ingram is in the lineup, we don't know who the 1 and 2 is exactly. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say that with Ingram's suspension being 4 games, that's a substantial suspension. And I think Alvin Kamara is going to really take off the training wheels. I think last season was the tip of the iceberg for this dude. And it sounds, I'm not openly high on a player this early in his career, but I see a lot of Todd Gurley. I see a lot of David Johnson in Alvin Kamara.
So the top ranked rookie, and we have actually a couple of 2-year guys in here with making Graham's list with Leonard Fournette. Well, actually, several of them. Leonard Fournette, there's actually 3 of them in a row. Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt, and Christian McCaffrey, all 2-year guys, sophomore season guys, ranked in the top 10 of Graham's list. But what I was going to mention is the first rookie in the list is number 7, Saquon Barkley, New York Giants. Is he going to get that much work done to be, is he going to get enough pressure relieved off of him to get enough successful work in to really produce at a high fantasy level?
Oh, yeah. I have Barkley as my 5th running back. I have him ahead of Le'Veon Bell. I think he's going to finish above him. He's not only going to get the workload, he's going to impact it running and receiving, but he's not going to be able to be focused on because you have Odell Beckham, because you have Evan Ingram, because you have Sterling Shepard. You have all these weapons on the Giants offense I think definitely Barkley, you're going to see a similar year to Zeke Elliott put up as a rookie with Dallas. The only difference is the Giants offensive line, while improving. I love the signing of Nate Solder. In the drafting of Will Hernandez, it's still not, up to par comparative to the Cowboys. It's definitely improved. Their offensive line looked like Ben McAdoo was the left guard last year.
Well, was he? That may be part of the problem. Was he?
And he was wearing a fanny pack trying to block the defensive tackle. And the
same thing about the Rams didn't make that many moves on the offensive line from 2 years ago to last year. Sometimes it's just a personnel change and it's a scheme change. So we'll see. I guess that's how down I was on Ben McAdoo. I think he just flipped that franchise upside down on its head and they stayed there.
There was one guy of interest to me that he ranked, and I thought it was Melvin Gordon. Didn't he rank him a little high?
Yeah, Melvin Gordon is ranked in the top 5. He's number 4. Yeah, so the Chargers.
That interests me because I have him in a keeper league, and there were some weeks where he did very well, and then there were some weeks where he did so-so.
I don't remember where he finished last year, but I'm thinking it was top 5 last year.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
top 5.
Right. Yeah,
very consistent.
Yeah. He would put up like 15 to 20, usually, which is good. I mean, that's fantastic. But when a guy like I hate to beat the dead horse, but Alvin Kamara was putting up 20 at least. I mean, show the man some respect here.
That may have been more of shock factor too. I mean, because in a rookie
Right.
season, anytime the backup comes back and a passing team, you ain't paying much attention to him. Let's be honest. That's going to be changed this year.
Yeah. That's fair. I mean, everybody, the bullseye's on his back, but just his running ability with the ball, his movement, the moves that he has, his repertoire.
He's got the skill set. Yep.
He's dynamic. Yeah, he's very dynamic. So, but I thought his ranking was pretty good. You know, Shady McCoy, suspension or not, I'm a little bit leery. I think that's the one guy out of all the running backs that could go one way or the other, and I don't like that. I don't like crowded backfields or a guy that could go one way or the other. I want to know what I'm getting with my fantasy running backs.
Yep. Buy low, let it flow from below.
Yep. Not buying low on running backs, though. Maybe. We'll see.
And you got to know what you're going to get.
Right.
That's the famous quote. So good luck to you, sir, in Sunday's fantasy draft. You need a championship to we're going to revoke your ticket to the show. Honestly, we're going to revoke your ticket to the show.
I need one bad. For that first year, I thought I was going to make the finals, and it didn't happen. I think the finals appearance is good. I mean, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan for crying out loud, so finals appearance is good enough for me. But to get knocked out on a 10-4 record, first round of the playoffs, no. That was not a good that was a very tough pill to swallow, Brandon.
Well, we're just letting you know we're doing ESPN-style cuts coming up in January. So you, Orlando Torres, DDT, all y'all are on notice. So better perform, or else you're getting the axe in January.
I think DDT went into hiding once he saw that Aaron Judge got hurt.
The penitentiary's putting it on me right now. Again, though, maybe in last podcast, but DDT's had the two best first days of a week in the fantasy history right now. Wow. Yeah, he put up like 200 points in the first 2 days. So I mean, whatever he's doing, 300. Yeah, like 300 in the first 2 days. So whatever he's doing, he needs to slow down. But I'm not giving up yet. Fantasy baseball playoffs winding up. NFL fantasy drafts coming soon to a keyboard or desktop or phone near you. So check out all these rankings and all this good stuff on myfantasysportstalk.com. Would be my advice to all the peeps at home, Dan.
Yes, I agree. Constantly going to be updating. I'm actually going to be doing weekly fantasy rankings throughout the NFL season with my Fantasy Sports Talk and Fantasy Pros as part of the expert consensus panel. So you're going to be able to rank, or my rankings are going to be judged analytically against the other experts, some guys like Matthew Berry, Andy Behrens of Yahoo Sports, who's also the head of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, which I'm a part of. But all the top guys are doing this year, and I'm honored to be a part of it. But that'll also bring out stuff for my Fantasy Sports Talk. Every week I'm going to be ranking every single position, top 50 guys by position by week. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. So any fantasy knowledge or anything that you might need leading up to your draft or through the season, definitely check out myfantasysportstalk.com, because we're going to have it all covered.
And I think the collaborative effort with you and Fantasy Pros, that was prevalent in, I think, the IDP article and the tight end article this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Great software that they are letting us use in order to put out our rankings to our fans, to our readers, with what they're helping us deliver. It's great.
There you go. All that is on the website right now. As we mentioned a couple of times, Hard Knock series, if you're interested in that, I am publishing reviews of each episode as they come up. That runs through September 4th. So we got, three more weeks of that. I can't believe it's almost here, but so check that out on the website as well. So all that going on, myfantasysportstalk.com. Definitely your stop for fantasy prep. Why go anywhere else? Thanks for watching another episode of My Fantasy Podcast. Thanks for Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take Podcast for joining us and dropping knowledge from below all the way down here in the My Fantasy Podcast world. So appreciate that. And for my co-host Dan Chalk, I'm Brandon Reed. Until next time, we'll talk more fantasy football, folks. Later. Peace. Hang on, Ryan. You ain't got to go nowhere.
Yes!
I'm still here. Look at that. that? Would you look at that? I'm still here.
Made it.
I'm still alive.